Hi, I'm Li Hao. Today, I want to talk about, well, as you can see in the title, I want to talk about Ensemble Actions. So, what is Ensemble Actions? Well, as you can see, if you Google around, you probably couldn't find this because this is a makeup word for a pattern that I found arising in creating a few actions, and I found that I need an actions that I can apply to a group of elements, and I want to apply an action to them together, right? So I have an action. So usually actions is applied to one per element basis where you just interact with one element. But sometimes I want these actions to be interacting with a group of elements that apply this action. So it's not applying to all the elements. You can group different elements together with one actions. And so we're going to look at some examples about this, right? I come up with 3 examples, as you can see over here in the REPL, and I will go through with you in detail in the first example, right? So we're gonna see how I transform something into an ensemble actions, and we're gonna take a look at example 2 and 3, which I already come up with that actions. So for the example 1, over here you can see I'm showing example 1. Example 1 is like this. I have 2 boxes that I have enabled drag and drop. So I can basically drag an items into the box, and then you will see that it shows up whatever I'm dropping into. So I can drop into the box 2 as well, but I can't drop A into box 2. Well, so there's a limitation of like I can only drop A and B in box 1, but not C, and I can only drop B and C, but not A in the box 2. Right. So this is a very contrived example, but I purposely designed this so that you can see what I'm coming over here. Right. So over here I use a drag and drop API. I use on drop and drag over event listeners for different boxes. And then for each of the A, B, C, I add draggable and on drag start and on drag end. And as you can see, because of I want the first box to only receive A and B, but not C, and second box for only B and C, but not A, what I have to do is that my on drop will have to be, I can't reuse the same on drop. I can't use the same on drag over, because on drag over, I check for a flag whether I can drop it. If I can, then I will prevent default. I will prevent the default behavior of the browser, which is to prevent all drag and drop. So so because of that, I have to have 2 different kind of event listeners checking different flags. And for the on drop, I have to use a different event listeners again, because I am going to call I'm going to append the data to a different drop zone string. So this string is going to be shown over here. So if you have watched my previous video about how to reuse event listeners with action, you can immediately see that I have defined a lot of actions over here, and probably I can reuse event listeners and create a new event out of it. Same thing goes with the draggable token, the circles A and B and C. But then I also want to incorporate this logic of what can be dragged into a certain drop zone. I don't want to just apply this draggable on all of them and then poof, I can drag and drop all of elements into all the drop zones, right? I want to scope certain items to be only drop into a certain drop zone. So we shall explore how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to come over here and then create example 3 final. Okay, so this is the end result. And the meantime, I'm going to copy example 1. Example 1 final, not example 3. So I'm going to paste it in. And we are going to use the example 1 final instead. And so I'm going to keep this example 1 for you. In the meantime, I'm going to change this example 1 final. So let's imagine how I would want the end result to look like. So let me collapse everything so that it's cleaner for us to explore imaginations. So I'm going to come over here, and this is how I would imagine instead. I would want to have a function. Function I'm going to call it get, drag, and drop actions. So you see, it's not an action, but it's a function that creates an action. So this function, hopefully, gives me a pair of drag and drop action. So hopefully these two are actions. So I can have two different pairs of this drag and drop action. So I'm going to call drag 1, drag 2, drop 1, and drop 2. So with these two pairs, I can come over here and, okay, so the first drop zone, I'm going to use drop 1. And for the second one, I would use drop 2. And now I'm going to come over here for the draggable part. I say A and B, I can drag from A and... So for the drop zone 1, I can only drag from A and B. So I'm going to use drag 1 for these two. And for B and C, for the drop zone 2, I can drop B and C, right? So I can come over here and then use drag 2. Okay, so as you can see, it's quite clean. I have drop 1, use drag 1 and use drag 1, drop 2, use drag 2 and use drag 2 over here. So this is the end result that I would want my actions to look like. So of course you say drop 1, what happens if you dropped? Yeah, then I would have probably a custom events as dispatch, right? If you don't know how to create a events using actions, you can watch my video, links in the description. So probably I will, with this drop 1 action, I will create a new actions. I call it on receive drag data. So on receive drag data. Oops. So for here, I can have my event handler. I'm gonna inline this by saying drop zone 1 plus equals to event.detail. So hopefully the string that is carried over from the drag 1 and drag 2 will be in the events detail. Will be received from the drop 1 event and then receive as event.detail. So I'm going to come over here and copy the same thing over as well, but change it to drop zone 2. So this is how it's going to look like. And maybe I can change this as well. So previously I'm just use a when I start dragging, I use the inner text as the data that pass into the drag and drop API, the data transfer. But over here, maybe since I'm using actions, probably I can pass this data in for my action. So then this data can be dynamic as well. So if you change the data, and then I can change my params over here. Hopefully by now you should be able to know how to update these params to your action. So if you are adventurous enough, you can pause over here and try to implement this pair of actions yourself. If not, I'm going to continue over here. So I'm going to define this get drag and drop actions. So I'm going to come over here, say function, get drag and drop function. So I'm going to define two actions, right? So the first one is called the drag action, and the second one is called the drop action. So you may ask me, like, why is it returning it as an array and you do this? I think since React comes out with the hooks pattern, hooks API, a lot of us realize that actually we can return an array of results, and then you can destructuring using array destructuring, right? We all know that, but then this is one good way that we can return something without enforcing the name of the thing that we are going to return. A lot of times, if we're gonna use this multiple times, then you kind of have to think out of a name to rename it, right? So if I gonna return drag and drop as an object, then because I'm gonna use this twice, I would have to manually rename it, like come and drag 1 and drop equals to drop 1, and do the same thing for drag 2 and drag drop 2. But if I know by convention, by design, I say that, okay, this will only always return 2 items, or maybe 1 or 3 items. Okay, not 1, but 2 or 3, like a fixed number of items. I think the best number is 2, at most 3. Then since it's only 3 items and I design in a way that maybe for some convention there's always a pattern in terms of the position of the items I'm going to return, then I can say that I'm going to return it as an array. So you can come up with your own name without having to destructure at the same time rename it. So I don't force whatever name that you want. You can come up with drag 1, drop 1, or blah 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 1 and blah 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 2, right? So it's up to you. So here I have my functions and I'm going to return it. So these two are actions. So remember, actions is a function, and function that takes in a node and a params. So I'm going to come over here and do this too for now. And now, so I need to incorporate some of this logic. So for the drag, previously when I have drag, I have set the draggable to true and on drag start and on drag end. So I'm going to copy this and come over here and define it. Right, I'm going to define this too. So first thing is node.draggable equals to true. Okay, that's settled. And then I am going to say, hold on, let me check my notes. I'm not sure whether I can pass it as a string, but let's just try it as a boolean. And then I'm gonna add 2 event listeners, right? On drag start and on drag end. So instead of writing it, I'm gonna copy, come over here, drag start, drag end. So previously we have a custom logics over here that says what can be dropped, right? So right now, since we're returning as a pair, we don't have to come up with this custom logic. We just need to say, define a variable here, can drop equals to false, and can turn this flag on. So anytime when we are dragging anything, it should always turn on as true. So this flag is going to be used on the drop, right? So I'm going to use the same flag in my drop event, so that's why I'm defining it outside of the drag, so that the drop can use it as well. So as long as this flag is turned on, then I am open to receive this data coming in. So okay, then on drag end, I need to reset it back to false. Okay, and then the data, instead of reading from text, since we're going to pass in as params, this is going to become over here. And I think that's it. So I am going to add event listeners. Drag start, and then on drag start, and do the same thing for on drag end as well. And then if I'm adding event listeners, I need to be a good citizen. I need to remember to remove it during destroy. So I'm gonna come over here, copy these 2 lines, paste it in, and then replace it with remove event listener. And one thing I need to do also is I need to make sure that I can update my param if it's dynamic. So this will be the new params. So I think name it to be the contents is better. So data, right? This is the data that we are passing in. So this will be the new data. And I just need to update this as the new data over here. So this will always get the latest data. Okay, I think that's great for the first action. So I'm gonna remove this. Sounds good. Okay, now let's focus on the second action, the drop. Oops, so I'm come over here and let's see. Okay, hold on, this need to be a string. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here for the drop. I am going to copy the drop handlers over here. Okay, so for the drop action, I'm going to do this too, right? On drop and on drag over. So on drag over, so let's copy these two events, listener. Okay, just copy this too. So on drop is to handle when this is being dropped, what happens, and then on drag over is to handle the time where should I prevent default, which is if I prevent defaults, which means not the browser default behavior, which means you allow people to drag over this item, right? The default behavior from browser is to prevent anything. So I come over here and I say on drop event, then I'm gonna get the data out of it. So this drop event, I don't have to do this, handle it myself. I can come over here and dispatch a new custom event, and I'm gonna call it receive drag data. And for the data that I'm gonna pass in for my custom event, we'll have this detail called the data. Okay. And on drag over, what I need to do is I need to check the flag to see whether this is turned on, which is only when I'm dragging anything that is covered by this drag action, only them can be dropped into my drop zone. And check this flag. If it's true, then I event different defaults, allow the dragging over, and I think that's it. So I'm gonna add event listeners again. So note that add event listeners drop, and then on drop, note that add event drag over, on drag over. And by now you should know what I'm gonna say. Be a good citizens. Remember, every time when you add event listener, you need to do destroy to remove them. So copy this too. Come over here, replace the add to remove. Whoops. And I think that's it. So let's remove this and let's, okay, add event listener, listener, not listeners, listener. Okay, I think it's good now, and let's try. So, okay, I can remove anything that we don't need anymore. So on drop one, all these functions can be removed. Even this flag can be removed. Okay, so we have this get drag and drop actions. Probably if you want to reuse across multiple components, you can move this into a file, and you can create it. You can call this outside of Svelte component as well, and then pass this drag one into one of the components in any components that you want to drag, and then drop the drop pair into any other components you want. So you doesn't have to use these two pairs in the same components. You can pass it to multiple components as long as they come with. So that's the beauty of coming as a pair. You can control what are the pairs, and then use it as a group. All right. So together, these two actions, and because they come as a pair, internally they are sort of like linked. And then all these actions, all the elements that apply with these actions works together to achieve one effect. Therefore, I call it the Ensemble Actions. So, does it work? Let's try it out. Come over here and I'm gonna drag. Okay, it looks draggable. Come over and drop A, drag, drop B. Yep, I can't drop C. Okay, let's look at the second. I drag A. Okay, I can't drop it. That's good. I can drop B and I can drop C. Well, that's great. We've achieved it. I will achieve a ensemble actions, a group of actions. It can be one actions or multiple actions, but they can apply to a list of elements, a group of elements, and these elements that apply with these actions works together in an ensemble manner. So I come up with a few other examples. It may be some contrived, but let's take a look at them. So let's take a look at example 2. So example 2 is what I call a mark update action. So this action again, it returns an action. This function returns an action, and this action I can apply to multiple elements, and they work together. So what this does is that this function over here, I call before updates within this function. Right? I can call this because I call this function immediately within the component initialization. So it still knows that I'm initializing this component, so it registers a callback function for this component. But I purposely call it inside this function so that it has a scope. It receives the same scope as the action that I'm going to create later on. So I'm going to create this action. So this action, what it does is that every time when you use this action, I'm going to add the element that is applied to into a set over here. And when I destroy, then I'll remove it from the sets. So anytime when there's an update, I'm going to come over here and iterate through the list of elements that applies this action and add an outline color red to them. So every time I change, outline color red. And great thing about this is I can't, instead of use it over here, I can call it, I can call this function. So say, name it first, get mark updates, right? And I can call this function immediately in my get default, right? So what this means is I can, oh, hold on, I can't do it. Can't do it over here because I have to call before updates. Well, that's sad, but I can figure a way to pass this mark update function around. Right, so if I come over here and say, let's think about a workaround over here. I'm gonna pass this mark updates into, okay, and then design something very ugly, but just for the moment, just for demonstration purpose, we'll design a function called set mark update. So I'm gonna create a pair of get and setter, and I'm gonna come over here, mark updates. So return this, and so bear with me. This is ugly. This is not what you're gonna do, but this is just for me to demonstrate that I can come over here, set mark update, and pass this action in. So for the sake of demonstrating that this thing works, these actions that you're gonna see will work in a pair, I'm gonna come over here and, okay, I'm gonna come over here and app over here, and I'm gonna import that actions, and I am going to use it. So see whether it works. Come over here, get mark updates. Get mark updates. This should give me an action. And then come over here, div use action. Okay, so probably there's a race condition where basically this get mark update, this registration, this initialization calls after my app.svelte after, right? That's why this is not set yet. So probably I can come over here, action. Right, I'm gonna say this is even uglier than I imagine. I didn't prepare this ahead of time, but let's see whether this works. I'm gonna say on mount. So by default is a no-op function. So I'm gonna say a function that does nothing. But then I'm gonna change my action. Let's see. Hey, there's Whoops. I don't think it works. I don't think it works this way. Action itself is not reactive at all. Well, I can come out again another weird idea. Is I'm gonna compose an action, right? So sorry for this. I didn't plan this, but let's come up with a node, an actual action over here. And my action, what I'm gonna do is I am going to. I don't think that works. Sorry. So let's scrap this. But I think what I want to point out is this. I can't point it out if it does not work. Well, I can. Okay, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna come over here, example for. I am gonna pass that function in. Script. Okay, export. Let action. And I'm gonna come over here, have a div full. Use this action. Alright, I'm gonna pass this action in. Okay, I don't need all this. I don't need all this crap. I'm gonna import example for. Well, it's not an example in the stricter sense. It's just a subcomponent. I'm gonna come over here, action equals to mark update. So I'm passing this action in. As you can see, now it applies the same action. And if I come over here and do this update, right? This will turn the board outline of this will turn into red as well. There's nothing relates to them. They are not. The only thing that relates to them is they are applying the same actions. So all the elements that apply the same actions will have the same behavior, or they form together to form one behavior, and therefore I'm going to call it Ensemble Actions. I'm going to call this name again and again so that it will be a real name when anyone tries to refer this next time. Alright, so last example 3. I'm going to come over here, change it to example 3. So this example 3 is again contrived, but I want to show you something. Again, the idea is the same. I am going to I'm gonna apply this action stats. I'm gonna have a function that returns me an action. So I guess you kind of slowly see this pattern where Ensemble Actions you have to have a factory function that creates this action. You have to have a function that creates this action, because whatever this function is always to be created anew, and only the function. So this function itself is unique, and if you apply it to a few, so that when you apply to these elements, they work together, right? It's slightly different where you already define a function. All the function is the same function gonna apply for all the elements. Yes, they can still work together, right? But this has slightly different sense where you always come up with a new function, and this new function, so you can apply this function to a group of elements. So you can have multiple groups of elements applied to the same action that has a similar behavior, but then they are grouped together. They are only formed in smaller groups because each groups use this one unique actions that was created for them. You can create 3. If you have 3 groups, you create 3 actions that logically they are the same, but because of the scoping that you do, because of the closure, not scoping, but because of the closure, it stores this group of elements in that closure. So the behavior happens together in that way. So over here, I create a stat actions, and this I'm gonna apply to all the item. So one thing interesting is I can actually this stats action is not an actual action, it's actually an object. So if you come over here and look at the code, I am actually returning an object, and one of the property contains that action itself, right? This is the action, and this object can also have more methods where I can use these methods to control my elements that apply this action. So I have more methods over here from this action. So I can actually apply an action this way, where I use and then colon, and then to get an action, I got to call object.actions, right? So you can actually, it doesn't have to be just a function, you can be a method, or yeah, in this case, it's actually a method, right? Because you define action on the object itself. So it can be a method, so it can be yeah. And so I get passed some information to this action. And over here, whenever I change, I have a different, I does something, right? I do a toggle. What it does is that it will call this object.get all the elements that has a value less than 20 and change the background to red. So if I toggle on, you see all of them turn reds. I toggle off back to normal. I can shuffle again this way and just demonstrate that this item data can be dynamic. And again, because it can be dynamic, I'm gonna during the update, I'm gonna update what other elements that is less than 20 or something, update the sets, things like that, right? I could have done it within this function as well, instead, so I can have a set of all the elements and then only filter them out in the get less than 20, or I can do it during the update as well. So up to you. So I shuffle and then toggle. You can see it's updating. Right. Of course, this has a glitch in this example. If you haven't spotted, let me show it to you. So I can toggle it on, and then I can shuffle. So whenever I shuffle, I am not going to call this reactive statement again, because shuffle does not change this variable nor this variable, so it's not run again, and therefore I couldn't like go in and highlight the elements that is less than 20 to be red, right? So this is not highlighted red, and the rest also not being removed background color, because I only take care of the element that is less than 20, right? So if I toggle on and off, I only take care of items that is less than 20. Well, there's a bug on this, but yeah, I'm just trying to show you how you could do with an ensemble action, but yeah, I didn't really bother to fix this behavior. Well, if you're interested, you can come up with something else, refine it to be better. But yeah. So ensemble actions. You've seen 3 examples, and so ensemble actions again is an action that applies to a ensemble of elements, and because they apply to the same actions, they works together to create one behavior. So if you have any other ideas about or you already written an action, or this sparks you an idea to write an actions that behave like that, and you didn't know it's called ensemble actions. Well, I didn't know as well. I come up with a name, but it's gonna stick ensemble actions. If you have an ensemble actions and you want to share, comments down below, share your REPL, share with the world ideas that you created. And as always, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And as always, again, subscribe to my channel so you get notified when the next video is out. So see ya, bye bye.